Good luck carrying that. All right. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Oh, good. I'm glad that you're wonderful and fantastic. Welcome to Writers Week Day 4. Happy Thursday. Before we start, let's thank a few people. You've heard this all week, but it's important that we give our thanks to them. First off, thanks to the Fremd Booster Club. Some of you have parents that are boosters. So if you know that they are, thank them. And if you don't know if they are, ask them. And if they say, yes, we are, then say, thanks a lot. And if they say, no, we're not, then say, be a booster so we can thank you. One of the most underappreciated groups is Tech Crew, so let's give them a round of applause for all of their help this week. The reason that we can hear such great musicians and speakers and students is because of them, so we need to always thank them for that. Take a look at your teacher wherever they may be. Say hello. Thank you for bringing me to Writers Week. Can I get an A on that last test I took? Hello, class. Good to see all of you. Also, this year we have posters for sale. They're right here, or it looks like that. They cost $10, super affordable, $10. This side of the auditorium can't see it. The stand doesn't come with it, it's just the poster. So make sure you buy one, they're pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and introduce our guest for today. Faisal Mohaiuddin is a writer, artist, and educator from Chicago, Illinois, and he is a Fremd graduate from 1996, so he's coming back to his alma mater, yeah. He is the author of The Displaced Children of Displaced Children, winner of the 2017 Sexton Prize in Poetry, and a 2018 Summer Recommendation of the Poetry Book Society. Also the author of the chapbook, The Riddle of Longing. He is the recipient of Prairie Schooner's Edward Stanley Award, a Gwendolyn Brooks Poetry Prize, and an Illinois Arts Council Literary Award. His work appears in The Forward Book of Poetry, 2019, Prairie Schooner, The Missouri Review, Wildness, Narrative, Crab Orchard Review, Poet Lore, Rhino, Tinderbox, Chicago Quarterly Review, Atlanta Review, and elsewhere. An alumnus of the U.S. Department of State's Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms program, Faisal is a graduate of Carleton College, Northwestern University, and Columbia College, Chicago. He teaches English at Highland Park High School, and he serves as an educator advisor to the global not-for-profit Narrative 4, and he lives with his family in Chicago. So please join me in welcoming Faisal Mohaiuddin.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to my next slide because this is how I want to start. Good morning, and thank you so much for welcoming me back to Fremd. So I want to thank the Writers Week Committee, Ms. Enck and Mr. Anderson, everyone else on it, and all of you for being here. I know some of you are brought with your classes, but that's how I came to my first Writers Week sessions, and so I have to always thank my teachers from back in the day for introducing me to the world of writing, which I'll talk a little bit about. I was very nervous. I did last session, and I was very nervous at the beginning, and then I kind of relaxed, and I was relaxed, and now as I walk up here, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like super nervous again. And I think having been relaxed 5 minutes ago is making me feel like even less, I gotta get back to that a little bit. So my name is Faisal Mohaiuddin. I graduated in 1996, and at some point in my life, this was not my path. For much of my life at that point, writing was not my path, but here I am, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my story. And I'll start with a picture. So this is kind of what I look like right now. This was taken from YouTube, actually. There's a great poetry YouTube channel called Ars Poetica, and it's where someone can read a poem and then they visually let the poem appear on the screen. And so most of my pictures are very serious, and I like that I'm smiling because I try to smile a lot. So this is me now. I'm going to show you a picture of me about the time when I was a freshman here. I can't remember if this is my freshman yearbook photo or my 8th grade yearbook photo or somewhere in the middle. My brother showed this photo at my wedding, and the audience gasped. And my wife was like, never, ever show this photo again. But this is me at that time. So I'm not sure what to say except this is me. I hadn't started shaving yet. I still have, when you're, some people just have a lot of hair, and my mustache started coming in second or third grade, and I had a lot more hair back then, so I do like that. My glasses, for a long time, that was like the ugliest pair of glasses in the universe. They're kind of coming back right now. I do love that shirt still. As much as my wife thinks it's like absolute garbage, I still love that shirt. So that like dorky young man over there, I think 13, 14 is probably how old I was. Any 13-year-olds or 14-year-olds in the audience right now? Okay, so all the people that are not raising your hand because you're too shy to, I was you. I would never raise my hand. I was always too shy. So some applause for the shyness. So so I was at a writing conference a couple of years ago, and I knew one person in a group, and there were a couple other people in the group, and I was like super intimidated. I'm like, these writers, I like adore writers, I worship writers, I admire them. And there were a couple of people in the group, I was like, I know this person's work. Am I even allowed to sit down in the same circle as them? And I had a friend who kind of knew them, and he said, oh, join us. And the question they were asking, the conversation, it was like a really long conversation, was what would your high school self, your 13-year-old self at the beginning of high school or whatever, think of who you are right now? And I was like, that's a great question. And I started thinking, I was like, this guy on the right would be very happy he doesn't look that way anymore. I don't know if the left is anyway. So I rephrase that question like this. So what would that dorky, prematurely mustached, ugly glasses wearing, but cool taste in shirts and full head of hair having high school self think of who he's become since Fremd? And that's a question I was wondering. I was wondering about, I was at Writers Week 2 years ago. I actually read, I think at the first or second Writers Week as a student. It was pretty incredible to have that opportunity to be up here and be like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And I'm up here. How many of you have read this week or ever at Writers Week? So I see some hands. Anyone read for the first time this week? Would someone like to share what that was like to be up here for the first time? Do you want to? Fun and scary. Would you do it again? And you're in the front? Did you read for the first time? What was it like for you? That's good that it's fun. Anyone not have a fun experience? Or anyone else scared? What was the response that you got from the audience or people afterwards or your teachers or even your own self speaking to yourself afterwards? Anyone want to share some responses they got from being up here? I can't see anything right now, so I'm like blindly. Okay, so right there, I see two hands pointing down to someone. So you, who's getting pointed to? So positive people, they say they enjoyed what you had said? Okay, awesome. Anyone else, positive experience? So the reason I'm asking, I'm really happy that even last period when I asked people it's really positive, and people's responses were like really encouraging. And there is so much power in encouragement and so much power in just listening to someone share, because it may be the first time ever. For me, it was maybe the first time I was in front of an audience that wasn't it was the first time that wasn't my class. I know in our classes we had to do a lot of writing, a lot of creative writing. That wasn't something I was used to, and it was very difficult for me, but I felt comfortable enough to do it. And then the response I got afterwards, I look back, I'm going to show you some of my early writing. It wasn't about the work. It was, but it was so much more about that courage, that initiative to get up there, to write something and to say, I'm going to share something, I'm going to perform it, I'm going to read it, I'm going to put it up on display, whatever that is. There's something really courageous about that, to say I'm gonna get in front of my peers. And then there's something really affirming and powerful and loving and generous when the peers or anyone who's heard you read says, nice job, I'm proud of you, that was really awesome, it hit me right here, or tell me more about it, or you should write more. Any of that kind of feedback is so powerful. And so when I think of this dude, which I'm going to destroy this picture after this presentation, he was getting a lot of encouragement from teachers, from classmates, from people he didn't even know, from his writing, and it was really powerful. So I'm going to go back to this. So this is it's a red notebook, and what I did, I have it right here. I just got some cardstock and I put a cover around it, and you can kind of see the tape, and I used Sharpies to kind of color it, and it's falling apart, and there's Post-it notes, and there's even a stamp that my sophomore year English teacher, Dennis Fremd, his home address, he said, "Oh, write me sometime." I never did. I feel badly that I didn't, but I still think of him often. So this was the book, it was a notebook. And so one day on my way home on the bus, my teachers were always like, "You should write more." And they were saying this to everybody. And they meant it seriously. It wasn't just an exercise and an activity, like just do it, you should do it, but you really should. It's powerful, it's important, it's beautiful. And I don't know how I got the notebook, but I used to take the bus to school, and one day I opened up the notebook and I'm like, I'm just gonna write. I don't know what to write. And so I'm gonna share with you the very first entry of the book that was called The Red Flower I gave it the title The Red Flower of Persia. On the back it's called Die Rotblume von Persia. I was studying German here, so I put it in Auf Deutsch, it's in Auf Deutsch. So January 25th, 1994. That's like a couple of days ago, plus 26 years. It's pretty incredible that this is what's going on. So that's what the first page looks like. And here's the entry. I'm going to read it to you. And if you're my teacher, what grade are you going to give me? Just kind of think about that. This is... Get ready. Red roses. Singing songs in Portuguese. That's profound. Landed upon my head and became milk. Check out that transformation of things. Which caused me to melt into a piece of salami. I don't even eat pork, and I'm becoming a piece of salami. That was eaten by a small dog. So I wrote this on the bus, Palatine to Rolling Meadows. I don't know what was even underneath the word roses, but I think that was a change I made after, later on, as the book kind of happened. But I remember feeling kind of excited by this. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of different and cool. And what grade would you give this? First time writer. A+. Oh, that's really generous. C+? B+. Okay. So I found this notebook many years ago, many years after high school, and I was like, oh my God, this is absolute trash. This is so bad, I hope no one ever sees this. Any kind of writing dreams I have are gonna get destroyed. So in my mind, I'm like, this is an F, this is crap. It's not, I love this. I love this so much, and I love the story that kind of led to this and came from this. And then at some point I was like, maybe a C-. You guys are really generous. But what I had forgotten, but then I remembered afterwards, is what my teachers, I showed some of my teachers, and they were, I numbered the pages. It's 376 pages, 372 pages of writing. Not a ton of writing per page. And I used to carry this around, and people were like, oh, Fassel's writing a book, and it was kind of this novelty. But I'll never forget what my teachers were saying. They were like, nice work, keep it up. That encouragement, that sense of it wasn't even so much about what I was writing, it was that I was writing it was really empowering. But then what I was writing, they would engage with that. They'd give me some ideas. They would say, this, try that, do this, read this person, read that person. And so I found today's entry 26 years ago. So I'm gonna read some of the entries, some of the other entries, and there are times when my handwriting is hard to read. My handwriting is still terrible. It can also be awesome. January 30th, 1994. The fat and happy frog drove me to school, but forgot the way, so he asked a nearby fly for directions. I smelled something fishy. Before the fly could ask what it was swallowed. I need a comma there. Before the fly could ask what, it was swallowed by the fatter and happier frog who had lied to me about getting lost. It's really profound, meaningful stuff here. I kicked it in the stomach, and the fly came flying back out. Thank you, it said. The fat and happy frog got mad because he was still hungry. He ate me. Wow. It's a lot of, like, something is going on in my life. I don't even, maybe if you psychoanalyze this, you might get some deeper meaning. But again, it was almost like nonsense. But I was like, I'm going to just play with words. I'm going to play with ideas. Poetry allows me to play. I'll read the one at the bottom of the next page. The pink cow asked me to climb upon a ditch. I'm going to climb upon a ditch and into the top of a mountain. I don't know what that means. Where there stood a blue dandelion that was playing the flute. The pink cow, I love the colors, told me to tell the blue weed to stop. Since the pink cow was standing on my back, it weighed 600 pounds. I obeyed its command. So I'm reading this stuff, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. And then part of the fun of this was, I don't know what to make of this, but it's fun. It's not an essay, it's not a thesis statement, it's not quote analysis. It's fun, it's playful, it's experimental. So I'm going to jump forward a little bit and tell you a little bit about the title. So the title of the book, this is my title, is The Red Flower of Persia. And so as I was writing, one thing I want to kind of back up a little bit. So my parents are immigrants from Pakistan. I'm Muslim. I was raised kind of in a pretty practicing conservative family, not super uptight. But there were a lot of things. I was the oldest of 5 kids, and there are a lot of things. Maybe it's different now, but back then, like, you don't like speak back to your parents. You don't ask too many questions. You always say yes if you're told, asked to do something. And there were always these things that I wanted to like challenge or question or say something about, but I almost never did. I can't remember many times when I actually like stood up to an adult and said something, especially my parents. And they were really like easygoing compared to other friends' parents I had. But one of the things that was like an absolute no-no was like relationships and dating and like having a crush on someone. And when I get to Fremd, there was this one girl who I had this huge crush on. And she was in a few of my classes, and I so badly wanted to talk to her. I have no idea what I was going to say or what was going to happen after that, but that desire to like, man, I just want to talk to you. I just want you to notice me. I want to like be your friend. I want to maybe imagine something more than just friends, whatever that was. I couldn't do it. I was like way too shy, way too scared, and also felt way too restricted. But I'm like, okay, if I do talk to her and she is interested in me, you saw the picture of me back then. It's unlikely that she was. What next? There's nothing. There's nowhere this can go, especially when I'm 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, whatever that is. And so I was shy. I felt like out of deference and respect, like I'm not going to rock the boat. And then the writing became like, oh, I can say things here. I can do things here. I can imagine things here. But at the same time, I was like, I kind of made myself, the flower was like a symbol of me. I'm blooming, I'm looking out of the world, I have a lot of positive qualities, but I'm stuck in a vase. I'm stuck I can't move out of here, I can't travel, like imaginatively travel. I can't even talk. I'm happy because I would show that I'm happy to everybody. Inside, in the vase, there's all this stuff going on. And the girl that I had a crush on was of Irani descent, so she was a Persian background. So I was like, Persia is going to be the symbol for her. So I started writing a lot about these moments in which I'm imagining conversations with her or being way more brave and courageous as I really was. And so I don't think most people knew that. So like May 22nd, 1994, here's an entry. The flower, and I'm going to refer to a you, this is that girl. I don't think she knew I was writing about her. No one really did, because it was like my thing. The flower's life becomes shorter every day. I'm running out of time. We all are. Once a seed, the beautiful bud is hidden behind a weed, remaining unseen. So I'm starting to get kind of symbolic here. Uncared for, the sweet odor of its petals drifts away from you, though it is meant for you. I'm like, wow, I use the word odor instead of fragrance. So there's a sense of like being very self-critical there. The flower cannot speak, so every passing second melts away in pain. Pull the weed and expose the beauty behind, unleash the hidden. Not much time is left to do so. So I was like, okay, this is me like really pining to speak, pining for that girl. And then I started thinking about like, what does that mean, not much time? And I was like, well, I have 2 classes with her. That's like the best part of my day when I'm like in her presence, and I'm 14, 15. I don't know what anything means in the world, but I feel this attraction. And it's May, middle of June, summer's coming, I'm not gonna see her anymore. And I'm not looking forward to the summer for the first time in my life. I'm like, I'm gonna miss seeing her around. And nothing ever happened with this girl, but what happened more and more is like these like really powerful feelings of frustration or anguish or whatever it was started going more and more into my writing. And then I was like, I can't have my parents read this, or my siblings. I have 4 younger siblings, and there's no way I wanted them to know what was going on, because then I was gonna have to, have to deal with them. But I'm like, if I write in riddles, if I write in symbols, if I write in code, I can do this. I can talk about this. So I'll jump forward. This is my 16th birthday. I found the entry for that. So May 31st, 1994. To enter Persia, the land where that girl is, one must first obtain a visa, for which I have written. So I'm just like playing with, wait, do I write to her? How do I do this? It's all kind of this young kid. Again, the teachers that I showed to, the people in my life, friends, even my parents were excited, like, wow, our son is writing, he's having some fun. That positive feedback, that positive response, the encouragement, that sense of, this is kind of cool, you should do more of this. So powerful. I was a science and math person. I love visual art. So I thought maybe I wanted to become a marine biologist. I still love marine biology. Like I could spend the entire, I could spend a year at the aquarium and not get bored. I love that place. But I didn't feel the same kind of energy and desire for science and math and art that I was starting to feel for writing and literature. And so I started thinking more and more. So I have a series of questions. I'm going to ask many of them. And the second question I thought about is like, how does any person express themselves during times when, how do you do this when you feel too shy, too afraid, too alone, too unheard, too small, too restricted, too unprepared, too unsure, whatever it is. You want to say something, but you can't. You want to stand up to something, but you can't. For whatever, either you're not allowed to, or you're just scared, or you don't have the opportunity, you don't know how. So writing became that thing. So I've written a poem. This is kind of it's just something I wrote for today, but for me, poetry was the place. And because I went to school here, because we had teachers that were like really encouraging it, we had Writers Week, and I feel like I'm I'm a paid advertisement for Writers Week, but I really genuinely feel like if I was not here at this school, I don't believe the writing would have happened. I think whatever life I would have lived, could have been a great life as well, but I'm so happy that the life that I'm living is the life that I have. I'm so happy and grateful, and just beyond, like, I don't even understand fully how important it was that I went to school here. And so my first book, like before it was published, it won a contest. It was, and the prize for winning was getting published, and it was a huge deal in my life. And the Daily Herald called me up, and they're like, "Oh, we want to interview you about this prize." And I'm like, "It's my teachers at Fremd. It's my experience there." So this is kind of what was happening, and I'm kind of making sense of this in retrospect. So poetry became for me like a secret code. I could do this in secret, as private, as free, as a safe place for me to escape my shyness, to resist the pressures of my family. I have a great relationship with my family. This is, again, from a teenager's point of view. Community, my culture, my faith, my world. To find a voice, to discover, like never before in my life, that I actually had a voice. To imagine new possibilities, to dream taller, to have fun. There's a lot of fun involved too, I will have to say that. To get noticed, to forge a sense of identity that transcended people's expectations. My own expectations of me. So that, for me, that's the power of writing in my life. And so I feel very fortunate that I've published things and that people read my work in different places. But this is the beginning, and this is kind of the thing. And I was commenting earlier, like, I don't know how I still have it. I don't know the fact that I'm grateful that I have it. Someone last period asked, like, what does your wife think about this? And I'm like, she thinks the stuff is terrible, but in a good way. So speaking of my wife, I'm going to tell you a little bit of, she's very supportive, I'm kind of joking. So when my wife is also of Pakistani descent, and she's Muslim, and so dating, again, is one of those things that is not acceptable, but you meet people, you fall in love, you get married, and there's got to be some way of getting to know someone better and some way of opening up or entering that conversation. And I was always like very shy, and I know my wife's family was even more like maybe conservative or uptight than mine. It's harder for females than males in these cases, and I knew that. And so I realized that I want to express my feelings to her, but that might not be taken well. It could be taken well, I don't know. We're still getting to know her. This is June 2008. And so I wrote this poem for her. And it's me basically trying to express, taking a huge risk in doing so, that I have feelings for you. Maybe even that I love you. I had fallen in love at that point. How it begins. How it begins is indeed a mystery. Nights suddenly become about longing and sleeplessness caused by that longing. Open up to it, and perhaps, darling, you and I will both have answers. Answers that matter only in the eyes of strangers. Winter and summer come and go. However, this only comes and comes. I know. Look at me, or look into me. Vast as the universe is, everything else is stillness. Anyone have an idea like what the most dangerous word in this whole poem might be? It was darling, actually. So to refer to her as darling, that could have been like, hold on a second, what's going on here? But there was another, the response was positive. I'm like, okay, if the response is positive, then I'll tell her more about the poem, and then we'll be able to have a more conversation. So I also put this into the poem. And so my wife's name is Hina Soda, and it spells out, is who I love. I couldn't say that directly without possibly messing things up. I mean, in retrospect, she's like, you could have said so. I'm not that, whatever. She kind of makes fun of how careful I was. But I had learned to be really careful. And the writing was like, okay, I can be a little bit more bold, a little bit more courageous. So then months passed, and I was like, I would like to propose to this woman, and hopefully she says yes. And in our culture, like kind of my community, like engagements are like family events. You set a date, everyone shows up, and there's nothing like romantic about it. You're sitting around, people are talking around you, they're feeding you sweets and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, that's not me. I'm that romantic. I want to have this special moment. And so I'm like, I'm going to go to writing. And so this is the poem that I wrote for my wife. There is no madness in this, only love. Whenever I miss you too much and talk like I've lost my mind completely, understand that life can no longer be the same for me. No longer can I think and not think of you. You who transformed my heart into a poem, opened it up and made me feel found. You who unraveled it to reveal the secrets within. Mostly you will find sweetness there, yours. All I have done is stored it, kept it there until it's ripe enough to serve as a remedy for this roving mind of mine, which longs and longs for you and only you. Yes, all this might sound like madness, but that's how love works, which is why everything depends on this. Will you marry me? So some of you already saw this. It was there. So I was like really debating, do I put that last thing in do I say, will you marry me? And I was like, I think this time I can't be indirect. I got to be direct. But I had started writing the poem to be indirect. And she said yes, and we're married, and we have a 5-year-old son, and she's a huge fan of mine, and I'm a huge fan of hers. And a lot of the writing, it's kind of brought me to her in some ways too. So the next question is about what things in your life is there for you an uncomfortable and or unclear sense of mystery, avoidance, silence, shame, fear, whatever. Anyone have something in your life that people like, we're not talking about that? Anyone want to share what that might be, if you're able to share? Or a person in your life you don't talk about? I can't see if there are any hands, so if you... All right, so I will, because I can't see. So in my life, one of the big topics was love and crushes and dating and all that good stuff. I couldn't really talk about it, so poetry became the thing. The other thing was like my father. So my father and I, very close. He was a super, super, super quiet. Like he never talked much, and especially as he got older, and he was in bad health for like the last 10, 11 years of his life, and he was like super quiet. And one of the things, he immigrated to the United States in 1971. Before that, he was in Hong Kong for 5 years, and he never really talked much about his childhood or about his life before we were born. It was kind of like we were born, or I was born, and that became like the beginning of his life. One thing I did know, one person he never talked about was his own dad. And I knew his dad had died when he was very young, but no one in the family, people that knew, would talk about it. And it was like super weird for me. Like, why are you not talking about grandfather? Like, grandmother lives with us. I never asked anybody. I'm like, there's a reason. I'm too scared. Maybe out of respect, like maybe there's too much pain here. I'm not gonna get to that topic. Anyway, but I found out. So he died 5 years ago, and a few months before he died, I finally asked him. It was this long, like 2-hour conversation. I was scared. I found out that his dad had been murdered, and that the people who had murdered him were people he knew in the small kind of town in Pakistan where he was living, where they were living at the time, and they never went to trial. They never got any punishment, and so they couldn't. No one could talk about it because they were scared. Like, these people out there, if they start making too much of a fuss, they might be endangering themselves. So that was something that was like always like, until I found out. I found out 5 years ago, so not very long ago. I'm 41 now, so this is when I'm 36 at the time. The other thing that was huge in my consciousness was partition. So if you have studied the history of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, that region, up until 1947, that area was a colony of Great Britain, and in 1947 it got its independence. And basically the way it was presented to me was like, this was a really great thing that happened. We got our independence. We had our own country. Pakistan was a Muslim country. India, a lot of Muslims left India. It was more Hindu and Sikh. Many Muslims still there. But if you lived along the border, people kind of migrated. And there was a sense of like, we have our own country, especially from the Pakistan side. I can speak to that because that's kind of what I grew up into. And Pakistan was 2 parts. The eastern part, if you look at the map here, so this is how the lines were drawn. So the part on the right side, that's Bangladesh. It was called East Pakistan up until 1971, and Pakistan was on the west. This is where my family was from, or is from. And so they lived, my mom's side, dad's side, on the Indian side, and they did migrate over. And in my mind, the migration, I never even thought about what was that like for people. So you get up, you move across the border, 30, 80, 100, 150 miles, whatever, I don't know, depending on where you were, and you start over. And that's like a really naive thing, but one of the reasons I was so naive about it is that people never talked about it. I got to college, I started doing a lot of research. I'm like, why is there so much silence about this particular period in my family history? And one of the first things I found in terms of my research was photos. And these are photos of people migrating. Extremely, extremely, extremely difficult, unsafe, dangerous. So 10 to 15 million people, depending on who you ask. migrated from one side to the other, and during the process, it was a very violent migration. And so between 1 and 3 million people were killed. And so it's possible that members of my own family were killed. It's also very possible that my family is alive and I'm alive because someone else was killed. So there's a lot of like this guilt and blood on people's minds and hearts and in their hands, and maybe not directly, but kind of in our consciousness. People don't talk about it. And so the more I look at these photos, I'm like, oh my God, this is horrific. These experiences, a lot of people died of starvation, of dehydration, of disease. So on the left, you can see like an old man carrying an older woman. On the right, you have these older people carrying children. Most people walked. If you had the means, you could take a train, but there weren't enough trains. And sometimes the trains would be hijacked, and everybody on the train would be killed, and the train would be sent. And there's these stories that were told about these trains arriving at the final destination was filled with corpses. Like really horrific stuff. And I'm like, oh, I think I understand why they're not talking about this. This is like really, really powerfully but people were still trying to get out. They were afraid to stay, they were afraid to go, a lot of chaos. And my mom was born afterwards, so she's told me some stories. My dad was born maybe 1944, 1945. He never talked about it, he was too young to remember. But my grandmother, the only story she ever told, we have no pictures, no documents, no records, there's no birth certificates or anything. My grandmother basically said your dad was 2 or 3, he couldn't walk yet, he was a late walker, and I carried him across the border. So like these photos kind of really stuck with me. This one woman is carrying 2 children. There's anguish here. The picture on the right is not a partition picture, I found out afterwards. But there's a lot of, there's refugees around the world right now. There's many like in camps looking for places to go. They didn't choose to leave, they were forced out in many cases for their safety. So the picture on the right, like, I was like, that reminds me of what my grandmother might have been like, and that baby reminds me, or makes me think of what my dad may have been like, and it's a really kind of haunting photo for me. And so when the book was happening, and a lot of my poems respond to partition, or they start with that not knowing, I was like, I want this picture to be on the cover. And and these were just images from the refugee camps. And so it took a long time for people to get resettled, and so this was like my journey in high school, and then this is kind of became the journey afterwards. Once I kind of decided, okay, what is it that I really want to write about? A lot about my family history. And so I'll read maybe one poem from that part of it, and then we'll kind of have time for some questions afterwards. So a ghazal is a type of poem. You write it in 2-line couplets, and the ending of every second line ends with the same word or phrase. And then in the final couplet, the speaker kind of refers back to themselves. And the title of the book comes from this. Ghazal for the Diaspora. We have always been the displaced children of displaced children, tethered by distant rivers to abandoned lands, our blood's history lost. To temper the grief, imagine your father's last breath as a Mughal garden. Marble pool at its center, the mirrored sky holding all his tribe had lost. Above the tussle of his wounded city, sad-eyed paper kites fight to stay aloft. One lucky child will be crowned the winner. Everyone else will have lost. Wish peace upon every stranger who arrives at your door, even the thief. For you never know when your last chance at redemption will be lost. In another version of the story, a steady loneliness mothers away the rust. Yet without windows in its hull, the time traveler's supplication gets lost. Against flame-lipped testimonies of exile's erasures, the swinging of an axe. Felled banyan trees populate your nightmares, new enlightenments lost. The rim of this porcelain cup is chipped, so sip with practiced caution. Even a trace of blood will copper the flavor, the respite of tea now lost. Tell me, facile, with what new surrender can you evade deeper damnation? Whatever it is, hack away before your children too become the lost. So some more poems, I'm going to skip them right now. And I'm just going to jump to this question here. What is your story? When and for whom will you begin to share it with the larger world? So, and I'll go back to this. This is who I was, it's still who I am. Who will you be? And hopefully the journey ahead is bright and exciting. Thank you so much. There's a few minutes for questions right now, and I would love to hear any of them. But thank you so much, Fremd, for welcoming me back and being such a great audience. Center, okay, yes. You know, I was here 2 years ago. I feel like, I think that maybe there's more students that are involved now. Like, I haven't followed it that closely. I mean, it's more digital now, things are online. There's a wider reach, like things are like broadcast, so like I have people that were like, oh, can I come? And I'm like, you can, but they're like, if I can't, so they can watch things. It's also like when I was starting, it was the first and second year of Writers Week, and so there wasn't this sense of tradition yet. But we knew even then that this is something very special beginning, and it's awesome that it's been around for 27 years now.
Right here, Fred.
Yes. I'm sorry? So my dad's family is from Lahore, and my mom's family is from Faisalabad. So the Punjab part of Pakistan. Other questions? Yes.
What's the biggest roadblock
You know, I think time is one. Like just giving writing enough time. Like there are times when I'm like really busy and I can't do it, and I feel like I'm not doing my job as a writer. This is from way in the early days too. Publishing is hard. Like, you know, the number of rejections that I got before I had my first acceptance of the poem is hundreds. But again, it was like I felt like such a strong sense of possibility and I knew I wasn't as strong of a writer as I wanted to be, I needed to be. So the rejections were just like, keep going, keep going, keep going. So the time thing, I was like, is this ever going to happen? Like there were times when I felt doubt about that. But I knew that if I keep writing, I will get better and hopefully good enough to like publish. Yes. I have. So growing up, like I've been to Pakistan 7 times, and growing up every few, 4, 5, 6 years in the summer we would go. And so I spent like the entire summer there. I speak Urdu, I speak Punjabi, so I feel very connected. I have so many memories of that place. And then anytime I'm not there, I wish I was there. I do love my times I've had there. So I have less family there than I used to. Thank you so much. I think our time is up. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the morning. And don't share this photo with anybody.